Hello, welcome to the Anti-Anxiety Summit. I'm so excited to share today's topic with you. Since the pandemic is kind of over and almost all the restrictions are lifted, it means that many of the invitations are coming back your way. You may be getting invitations to go to happy hours with your colleagues, or maybe you're getting requests from your family for help, or you're being invited to family gatherings. Okay, I know some of you might have embraced the pandemic because you could actually use the pandemic as an excuse for not saying yes. But now you may be getting stressed again because once again, you feel like you have no other choice but to do all these things that you don't want. If the thought of having to say yes to something that you don't want and it's causing you stress, then this whole workshop is for you. What you're experiencing is people pleasing tendency. So in this workshop, I'm going to go through a few things. First, I'll begin by sharing with you 5 things that you do during the decision making process. Then I'm going to share with you what exactly people pleasing tendency is, how it came about, and how it's affecting your life. And then I'm going to share with you 4 things you can implement to help you deal with your people pleasing tendency. Okay. Before I begin, I want to introduce myself to you. My name is Claudia Chan. I am a life coach for Asian women, and I empower them to live the life they want for themselves. And I stress for themselves because majority of the women I work with do have the tendency to people please. So I guide them through letting go of people pleasing behaviors, letting go of expectations that were imposed on them so that they can give themselves a chance to explore what they want and then go after what they want. As a Chinese woman, this is one area I worked on a lot, and to have a lot of courage to stand up for myself, to say no, to verbalize what I want or what I'm thinking. So this is what I do with my clients. And I'm really excited about today's workshop. So let's begin. First, let's go through the 5 things you do during the decision-making process. Let's say someone has invited you to an event or they have made a request to enlist your help. There are usually 5 things that you may find yourself doing. The first thing you do is you usually say yes pretty quickly. And when you say yes, you could be coming from 2 different energies. The first is you immediately say yes because you actually feel accepted. You feel you're important. So your thoughts may be, yes, someone's including me and I feel relieved. Or it could be thoughts like, I'm helpful, I'm needed, and it makes me feel important. Either one of this actually make you feel like you're part of the group and make you feel like I belong. Okay, so that's the positive energy. And then there's also another second energy that some of you may be coming from when you make that decision. The second energy could be resentment, guilt, or even from fear of judgment. So this makes you feel like you don't have a choice. You feel like you're trapped and you were made to do this thing. So your thoughts may be, well, that's not fair. I'm asked to do this again. I don't want to do this, but I have to. I'm supposed to, or I have to attend this party, or else they're not going to invite me again. So a lot of these come from the negative aspect of the energy. I'm elaborating on this action alone because I want you to become aware of how fast your brain is working. You might have felt all these things before in your body, but you weren't aware that they were working in your subconscious mind. And you've been pre programmed based on your past experience. So, whether it's from a positive or negative energy, your brain has already pre made some of these decisions for you. So then, whenever the next time it happens again, your brain will just go to the automatic yes. This is a very important and crucial first step because you have to be aware of this happening inside. You have to understand this about yourself. The first thing that you usually do when it comes to decision making is that you just say yes very quickly. So then what happens is afterwards, the second thing you do after you say yes is then all of a sudden you realize that it is not something you want to do. And so you'll be thinking like, oh my gosh, I really don't want to do this, right? It could be, one of your friends may be asking you to hang out with them, but you have already have a bunch of things you have planned to do. Maybe you have to wake up very early the next day, but you have said yes. And now there is a conflict. So one is you say yes very quickly without realizing it. And two is then you realize that it's not what you want. Now at this point, this is where you start to get stressed out, because the third thing that you usually do is you try to come up with an excuse to see how you can get out of it. So in your head, you're racking your brain, trying to come up with an excuse that is believable so that you can get out of attending the party or not completing the request. So you're starting to stress out because you're thinking, what can I say so that I don't have to do this? Now, following immediately after is the fourth thing that happens. You start to get even more anxious because you're now anticipating how the other person is going to respond to you. And I really wanted to separate out number 3 and number 4 because they are actually two different things. In number 3, you are coming up with an excuse. In number 4, you're anticipating what the other person is going to react. And that is usually the part that gets you really anxious because our brain just love to dwell into the worst case scenario. What could happen if I do this? What would they say if I do that? Are they going to think that I'm selfish? Are they going to ask me a bunch of questions to pressure me into this? If I say no, what if they don't accept me anymore? What if they don't invite me to other things anymore? So you have all these thoughts that are running in your head, and you are creating all these scenarios that is giving you that anxiety. The reality is maybe the other person may not react the way you think, or maybe they will, but I want you to understand that the anxiety is not coming from their actual reaction. This anxiety right here is created within your brain. It's your thoughts. What you're thinking, how you're anticipating for it, that's creating the anxiety. Okay, so I want you to identify this for yourself. So then, after you have done all this, what happens? What's the fifth thing that you usually tend to do? You overcompensate when you're telling them your excuse. So here's the thing. Maybe you would actually talk yourself into doing the thing that you don't want, right? You could be attending the party or you could be helping out. Or maybe finally you have worked up that courage. You say, hey, listen, I cannot do it this time. Okay, maybe you are ready to tell them the excuse that you're not going to do it. But what happens is, as you're explaining yourself, you end up overcompensating for it. What I mean is, you may say, I'm sorry, I can't do this. I'll make it up to you. So instead of just saying, no, I can't, you in turn make yourself feel like you need to do something to pay them back. I want you to really notice when you do any one of these 5 things. I always say awareness is the key. Okay, so let's recap on the 5 things that you do during this decision-making process. Number 1 is you say yes. Number 2 is when your body realizes that you don't want to do the thing. Number 3, you start thinking of excuses. Number 4, you start getting anxious, anticipating for the response. And number 5, you overcompensate. And any one of these is a combination of them. It could be all of them. That kind of defines people-pleasing tendency. So I'm now going to go into the second part of the workshop. And this is where I want to explain to you what people-pleasing tendency is, how it came about, and how it actually affects your life. People-pleasing tendency happens when we give up who we are to mold ourselves into another person's expectation. So it is a shape-shifting behavior that we had picked up on when we were kids in order for us to survive. This is very important because people-pleasing tendency is actually a survival mechanism. It's not something that we really want to do. It's just something that we had picked up when we were kids. So I want you to know that there is nothing wrong with you. You were just pre-programmed to act this way. It has served you during your childhood, but now that we're adults, this behavior is no longer serving you. We want to identify it so we can change this behavior. So, how did people pleasing tendency come about? Because it is a survival mechanism, then we want to understand how it was formed. We pick up our people pleasing tendencies through both positive and negative reinforcement. For positive reinforcement, whenever we got praised by adults or our peers, it reinforces our behaviors. For example, it could be your mom or your aunt saying things like, "Look, she's so good, always taking care of other people. Look, she's doing all this stuff for us." Or maybe when we were with our friends, instead of doing what we want, we gave up our choice, what we want, and what we desire, and we were welcomed into the group. So, this positive reinforcement trained our brain to see that by giving up ourselves, it actually benefited us. So, our brain wanted to do more of that because it made us feel good. That is how people pleasing tendencies were formed from positive reinforcement. Now, I'm going to explain a little bit about the negative reinforcement. And there are usually three that I focus on. The first one is whenever we feel physically threatened because we have been punished, abused, yelled at, our brain knows not to speak up because our brain's job is to keep us safe. So it will keep telling us, do not speak up, do not put yourself into harm's way. Our brain will tell us not to say anything. The second negative reinforcement comes when we were shamed. For example, if we were asked to help out and if we said no, and if our caretakers had responded with, "I gave up everything for you. I made sure you were well taken care of, and this is only a small favor, and you don't want to do this. How ungrateful are you? How selfish of you? What's wrong with you?" Right? So, all of these things that we heard pretty much told us in a way that we were bad, that there is something wrong with us. And this is where shame comes into play. And the third negative reinforcement comes when our parents had ignored us or kicked us out of the house when we did something else. So, to a small child, this is a physical removal of love. And it can be very devastating for a child. So, we learn to change our behavior so that we can earn back that love, earn back that attention. All of these negative reinforcement could be quite traumatic or devastating for you as a child. When you were young, you only knew how to deal with it in order to survive. So, what you ended up doing was abandoning what you want, abandoning who you are in order to please other people so you didn't die. And that's why I said this is a survival mechanism. It's something that you have picked up while you were a kid. So I want you to know that nothing is wrong with you. You aren't doing something wrong or bad. You had just been trained to act this way because you needed to survive. Now, these things are no longer helpful for you. As a matter of fact, it is actually hindering you. So now let me move on to how people pleasing tendency is actually affecting your life. And I'm going to speak into three of these things. Number one, you are indirectly telling yourself that you are not important. So here it is. Even though you might have made plans, when you say yes to someone's request, you are literally right here and you're inserting someone else's priority over you. So you're telling your brain indirectly that you are not important. Maybe you want to exercise. Maybe you want to read a book. Maybe you want to write a book. Maybe you want to cook yourself a nice dinner. Maybe you want to learn something. Maybe you want to start a business, but you give all that up for someone else. You're telling your brain, nope, I'm not that important. I can take a backseat. So that's the first way that is impacting your life. Number two, it impacts you by decreasing the quality of your own life and creates a lot of conflict between you and the people around you. When we feel we have to do something we don't want to, when we are about to do it, we bring a lot of negative energy to this thing. We have a lot of resentment. We feel trapped. We feel that we've been taken advantage of. So when we approach this task, is a drag. When we go to this event, we feel bummed out. It doesn't feel good, and the quality of your life has been decreased because of it. And what's more, we may be creating conflict between us and the people around us. Let me give you an example. If, let's say, your mom asked you to help her with something, but you already made plans with your spouse or your partner, when you cannot say no to your mom, you have to stress out trying to figure out how to fit both things at once. How are you going to ensure both parties are happy? And then you may have to interrupt or cancel the plan you have with your partner. So you're telling them that they're not important. And sometimes you may even rope them against their will into doing something that they don't want. So this is how people pleasing tendency impacts you to give you a lesser quality of life and create so much conflict in your life. And number three, by denying yourself, other people are not truly loving who you are. Maybe for you, you feel like you're someone who needs a lot of space. You may think that you love to be on your own, you don't like to be with other people. But the truth is, we're all human beings, so connection is very important to us. But what's really happening is that when you people please, a wedge is introduced between who you really are deep down and who you are presenting out in the world. And the more you people please, the gap between these two things become wider. So you're a walking facade. Let me give you an example. Let's say your friends love jazz. You don't really like jazz, but you pretend you like jazz, or you make yourself like jazz so that you can be included in the group. And when they invite you out to a jazz night, that's when you feel like, oh, I don't want to go because deep down you don't like jazz. You would rather stay home and read a good book. So that's why there is this big resentment of not wanting to go because it takes a lot of effort to pretend to be someone else. So now, what's wrong with this picture? Let me ask you this. So, do your friends really like you or love you for who you really are? Or are they only liking or loving the version of you that you put out? And this is why you keep feeling like no one understands who you are because the truth is you haven't even given other people a chance to really get to know you. So these three are the impacts of how people pleasing can cause in your life. So to recap, people pleasing tendency happens when we give up who we are to mold ourselves into another person's expectation. And we actually developed this when we were children as a survival mechanism based on either positive or negative reinforcements. And the three impacts it has on our lives are one, we believe that we're no longer important. Two, it decreases the quality of our own lives and creates conflict between us and the people in our lives. And three, other people are not truly loving who we are. So, what can we do about this? I'll share with you 4 things you can do to get started dealing with people pleasing tendencies. 1, become aware of what you're doing and take full responsibility for it. This is one of the most important steps. That's because some of you may not even realize that this is what you're doing. And even if you do, you may feel like you have no other choice. You feel trapped. You have a lot of resentment. So you start blaming other people for not being more considerate, blaming others for taking advantage of you, blaming others for not caring about you. But what's really happening is because you have these people pleasing tendencies, how you act had been enabling them to do what they do. If you think about it, let's use the jazz example. By saying that you like jazz, your friends don't know that you don't like jazz, and it's natural for them to invite you to something you don't like. Or if you had always gone out of your way to help others, you have made other people come to expect it from you. So I want you to notice, understand, and acknowledge this is a tendency you have. So now you can stop blaming other people and start taking your responsibility back to change your life. So that's number one, take responsibility. Number two, you ask yourself these two questions. What am I making it mean about myself when I say no? And what if it's not true? So let's run through an example. Let's say your mom had asked you to prepare 2 dishes for an upcoming party. You're very busy and cannot help. Previously, when you had said no to your mom had made comments such as, I'm doing so much to put this party together and you don't want to help me. How selfish can you be? So you're once again at a position where you do not want to help your mom. So the two questions, okay? If you are to say no, what are you making it mean about you? Notice what comes up. Maybe you'll make it mean I'm selfish, I'm a bad daughter, I don't love my mom. This meaning is very important. I want you to know that this meaning is really not true. This is usually where I work with my clients closely because your brain has been believing this for so long, it's become true for you. So if you're doing this on your own, this is where I would like you to ask the second question. What if it is not true? What if saying no to your mom doesn't mean you're selfish? What if not cooking the dishes doesn't mean you're a bad daughter? What if your actions don't mean that you don't love your mom? What comes up for you? So, this is something that you can do for yourself and you can journal about it. Three, ask yourself, who am I? And what do I really want for myself? For those of us who have people pleasing tendencies, asking ourselves what we want is very foreign to us. Most of the times, we don't know what we want because we've been looking outside for signs of how we should act. And we've done it for so long that we actually don't even know that we can turn inside to trust ourselves. So now it is the time for you to start finding out who you are. Who am I? What do I really want for myself? Here's the thing, this people pleasing tendency is causing you in some way. You're born into this world to live as you, not for someone else. So here are some other questions you can ask yourself. How is what I'm doing makes me feel unimportant? How is doing things I don't want causing me anxiety, stress, or resentment? How are other people seeing me? How are they misunderstanding who I am? What are my boundaries? What am I comfortable or uncomfortable with? So start questioning yourself and ask, what do you want for you? Four, always consider your desire and prepare for possible things to say in response to upcoming party invitations or help requests. It is very important to pay attention and become aware when these situations come up. Because, as I said before, replying yes is something that is quick, something that you do right away. So, you want to delay this quick yes response. It is important to practice pausing so you can ask yourself permission before you reply. You can ask yourself something like, is this something I really want to do? If you want to give yourself more time to think about it, then you can always say, I can't answer you right now. Let me look at my calendar and I'll get back to you. And here are some other sample responses. Thank you for thinking about me, but I already have plans that day. Unfortunately, I am at my full capacity. I'll have to pass on this. I'm sorry, but I won't be able to make it. I'm sorry you feel that way, but I really cannot. Please note you do not need to explain yourself. No is a complete sentence. You don't have to say anything more. If you say, I already have something to do, and if the other person inquires further, you can always say, it's personal or it's a private matter. Know that these responses are coming from loving yourself. Okay, so you want to pause and reflect on what you want and how you want to respond. By doing this, you're telling yourself, I am important and I am being true to myself. And if you're still scared, understand that you can't change other people's reactions and you're not responsible for other people's feelings. You're doing this for yourself and you matter. So let me recap the 4 things you can do to stop your people pleasing tendency. 1, become aware of your behaviors and take responsibility for yourself. 2, ask yourself, what am I making it mean about myself if I say no? And what if it's not true? 3, ask yourself, who am I and what do I really want? 4, always consider your desire and prepare for possible responses. And that's all I have for today. And I hope that this workshop is helpful for you. If you want to understand further about how people pleasing tendencies are formed based on negative reinforcements, I have an ebook called 3 Reasons Why You Can't Say No and What Can You Do About It. You can find it at the link attached. And I would love for you to join me on Instagram. My handle is at claudiachan.co. I'm fairly active on there. So if you want to send me a message, I would love to chat with you on there. Thank you again. And I hope to connect with you soon.